tractor beam out of commission, or this is going to be a real short trip. Okay, hit it!
Hey, welcome back to another Collector Spotlight. This is a special one, I think. We've got Tom Spina with us. Tom, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing okay. I got a little bit of like the spring allergy thing happening tonight. So
Yeah,
if
that's
I sound
okay.
a little extra nosy, that's why.
That's okay. We'll let you mute and blow your nose every now and then.
Exactly. Yeah. Every once in a while, I'm just gonna like drop out of the frame.
That's okay. But yeah, guys, we got Tom Spina on tonight. Tom is the head of creator at Tom Spina Designs and Regal Robot. And
that's accurate. Thank you.
Yeah, right. And he makes a bunch of amazing things that we all love to buy and put in our own collections. And I would say, I have to say, congratulations.
Thank you
on such an amazing, well done sellout of your amazing chess set. Right? I mean,
that was
crazy.
A really nice cap to like 9 months of very, very hard work by a lot of people. And, just on behalf of myself, everybody at Regal Robot, Phil Tippett, John Berg, Dennis Murin, everybody involved with the project, thank you to so many people who, in 36 minutes, wiped this out.
Amazing.
It's going to be, it's nice. I mean, the good thing is we do still have like those 2-pack versions as well.
Right.
And I'm really glad we did that. We've had all this experience with these various things that have been selling out quick on the crazy high-end collectible type stuff, and to now have at least another option for folks, I think is really cool. It's when something goes out in 30 minutes, you just kind of got to say, oh, I'm glad we have something for everybody else who just wasn't there immediately.
And is this the first time you guys? It's the first time you guys have done that, right? Done the
So, well, I guess the closest we come is with the CZ3, where we did the signature edition and a numbered edition.
Okay, yeah.
And so we had, the signature edition sold out in minutes, and then the numbered edition, actually, you can even still pick up one now. They're down to about 14 left, I believe, out of the 50.
Crazy.
And we're just gearing up to start on the last of those. But yeah, like things like the Rancor, we just did the one edition. Some of the other stuff. So it'll be interesting to see the next about 30 or 40 days. Those 2-packs will be available, and then once that's done, we cap the edition, we set the size on those, and we set about starting to make these.
That's awesome, man. What an achievement. And we got some people. I mean, John's up here in Ireland, awake watching this. Amazing.
Morning, John.
Yeah. Morning. It's Friday for him, so that's really cool. So yeah, I think let's jump in. We've got a lot to talk through, and obviously, Tom, we don't want this to be 4 hours, but we do need to kind of move through this. But you've got a lot of amazing pieces that we want to hear stories about. So let's just kind of work through it.
I mean, I guess personally, I think it's just cool that you guys have collectors on to talk about their collections. I think that's the whole reason we collect this stuff is to share it. And sometimes when that's at your house, or maybe it's at your office, or wherever you've got your stuff, not everybody gets to come through and see it. And maybe you got a handful of friends that are really good friends that come by. And I'm I kind of put some of this stuff out there, but for the most part, I'm not a super showy kind of guy.
Of course.
So really, when Jason asked me to do this, it was just kind of like, it's like, do I want to?
Well, we appreciate you doing it, Tom. And just so you know, like, what's really cool about this too is that a lot of people get a lot of inspiration from seeing everyone's collections and go, man, maybe I should start collecting this or that, right? Like, it's really cool to.
So I should have put more Regal Robot stuff in my collection.
Right? Yes. Yeah, that's what you should have done. But
I do have, almost everything we do. I try and keep the either our first prototype or a Photomaster or something like that for myself. Ultimately, look, it's like when they talk to George Lucas about making movies, or if they talk to you know, a writer or musicians, you know, it's like, it's always, oh, I wrote the song I wanted to hear. With Regal, it's very much, it's like, I'm making the props and the replicas and the decor that I want to have.
Of course,
you know,
of course.
And that's why I think everything that we do has so much kind of oomph behind it, because we're all, you know, collectors at heart, and we're thinking with that mindset. We know how people are going to want to bring this in because we want to.
Yeah. For sure.
But yeah, very very happy to be here and happy to share.
Good. Yeah, we're
fantastic.
happy to have you.
Yeah, and I find real quick before we start, Tom, also doing this, as you said, with sharing, but it also for people who don't always know some of the aspects of collecting that is available to them. I think some of the information is very helpful to learn about, or there's things that they may be interested in that they never knew they were interested in until they see it or are exposed to it.
That. Yeah, so much over the years, especially in the screen use community, because I mean, certainly there's that transition for a lot of folks when they change over from replica props to screen used props as a collector, which is, you know, kind of my focus now, although I still do a lot of unique replica stuff. There's definitely a moment of like, oh, I can get that? Like, oh, that's a thing. Like, I didn't even know that was available. Like, I thought that was out of the reach of mere mortals. And maybe some of that's changed in the 25 years that I've, you know, drifted into the screen use sort of stuff. But you know, it's definitely a little tougher to break into that as a hobby right now. But certainly back in the day, it was a lower price of entry, and you could get involved in stuff that you didn't think you could, and you would definitely see stuff in someone else's collection and be like, oh, you know, that's actually kind of neat. Maybe I could do that. Or I've seen people who have taken inspiration from my collection and started to focus on certain things that they saw from me, and not even like covertly, not even, you know, where it's like I'm looking and jealous or anything. It's more like, you know, maybe they've come over and seen the collection or whatever I shared with them, and then, you know, 2 months later they start picking up cantina pieces, and they're like, oh, I've decided I'm going to focus on cantina stuff. And it's like, part of me is like, oh, that's really neat, and the other part's like, wait a minute, that's my thing. Hey, you know?
well, a lot of times too, I feel like the more we get into this, the more we talk to people, the more I realize that it's also about who you know in collecting that helps you get some things that you couldn't otherwise get. Like some people, you know, just knowing people helps kind of lead you to a piece. And for sure. It's interesting. It's really cool. So, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Where do you want to?
Let's get in. Let's get in this. Let's start right here.
Not much.
That's fantastic. It's so good.
I'm slightly obsessed with the Star Wars Cantina. There was a guy in the late 90s, and I apologize, his name escapes me. I believe it was Jason. He had a website called Sluis Van Shipyards or something like that had featured different collections of people's. And he nicknamed my collection the Spina Cantina. And it's stuck, you know. I'm like, I love it, and I'm so happy I didn't think of it, because I just don't want to be that guy, you know. Like,
right.
You know, it's like, but somebody else came up with it, so it's okay. And hey, congrats, Taylor DeCaro. There, that's I love that concept Java piece. I hope you do as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm gonna and there's only a few of those left. I think we're down to like 25 out of 250. So.
Cool.
Anybody who's been thinking about it, don't wait. But yeah, so this corner is really cool. It's a little nook in the collection room that was there, and I just thought it would make like a nice little cantina booth someday. And I always had it in the back of my mind. I think like a lot of people, you know, when I was house hunting initially, you look at every house going, I'm spinning. There we are.
Skipping a little bit. There you go.
All right. I'm going to give this a second.
Yeah, there you go. You're back.
There we go. I thought I lost you. But, you know, you go house hunting and you're looking at every house going like, all right, well, those 2 bedrooms could be like, you knock a wall out and that could be like an office collecting room, or like, oh, that's got a really good sized basement. We could split that off, and then half is this and half is that. So, you know, I definitely found a house with a big space for the collection. I have a particular way that I like to display stuff. My job at Tom Spina Designs is to display stuff for other people and to restore original props and to make custom mannequins and things like that. So, you know what? If you go back one, well, I'll just go quick through what's in that shot. So this was a Nook. I thought like, oh, someday I'll make a cantina booth out of it. We eventually did a commercial for the Super Bowl where we got to make all the Star Wars cantina aliens and stuff. And so the Cabe costume and mask and hands, that was all stuff used in the commercial. The Hammerhead, it was a full costume used in the commercial. And the Muff Tack there is not the one we used in the commercial. That one's actually at the studio in the lobby, but that's just another one that we had made. But the bench and the table were both from that same commercial, and it was stuff that they had kept after the shoot, and I had kept in touch with the property people, and at some point they weren't going to store them anymore, and they're like, you know, do you want this stuff? And it was like,
of course,
give me a minute, you know.
That's amazing.
So, and
how tall is that Hammerhead?
So it's tough because he's only a torso, you know. He doesn't have anything from the waist down. But if you could picture someone wearing this, they're going to see out of his neck in between the kerchief and the head.
Yeah,
there's
right here.
A black translucent scarf there that they see through. Exactly. And there is a helmet underneath that mounts the head to their head. The original puppet was actually, it's actually a puppet, not a wearable costume. So in A New Hope, John Berg is actually behind him. He's running his hand up through the back of the head, and he's controlling the thing. Phil Tippett's lying on the bench and controlling the eye blink. And John Berg is actually behind him under a black sheet. And if you know where to look, you can almost spot it.
Oh, crazy. This thing's beautiful too. I mean, my goodness.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. We got to restore the original costume of Muff Tack from my dear friends, Bob and Kathy Burns. And, there's something you get, one of the things that we try to do whenever we're replicating something, we want to be as authentic to these real things as possible. And a lot of times that means you have to be hands-on with this stuff, wherever possible. Maybe something doesn't exist anymore. Maybe something's, lost to time, or maybe it's just out of reach for whatever reason. But anytime you can get hands-on with something, you learn so much. You see so much that you just can't see otherwise. And Muff Tack's one of those. Our first pass that we did for the costume for that 2011-2012 commercial, which if you go to Tom Spina Designs and just search Cantina, you'll see we've done a whole bunch of these different Cantina gigs, commercials and videos for Lucasfilm and whatever else. And over the years, we've built almost all the aliens in the process. But after really spending a ton of time with the costume and restoring, you just bring in all these little details and just touch points that you can't get just from photos. And then you can't unsee once you've seen them. Once you know it's there in person, you go back and look at a photo and you're like, oh, okay, there it is.
Tom, has there ever been a time when someone was going to, like a production was going to throw something out or not store something and didn't have space for it? And you were just like, it is what it is. Like, what?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it definitely, we don't get a lot of stuff that way, but a lot of times, things are going out to collectors because they're being disposed of by these productions. There's so many things from Star Wars that as the Brits say, were saved from the skip.
Right.
You look at how many of the original Stormtrooper suits and helmets and stuff were out there from the first movie, and it's literally all stuff that was going to be thrown away.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They just didn't think they were going to use it again.
Wow.
So that's. I like rubber masks and monsters and heads. This is actually a very pared down mask collection for me. There was a time I had a lot more of the Universal monsters, and especially for me, like Hammer monsters, stuff done by Carol Hicks and David Lady and Tony Pitoko up in Canada and stuff like that. And unfortunately, you just don't always have space. And so you start to focus on things. And then other things that happen is, I think we all have this where, certain things come into the collection. In order to do that money-wise, maybe you've got to send some things out of the collection. So, I every once in a while, I like to go back and look and like, oh, what was in the collection room? I'll take a picture every couple of years of the room, you know, and I'll just look back at it and kind of marvel at how much things have changed in the last 20 years or so. So cool. most of these are either things that I have made or that the team has made for productions and things like that. So if you scroll, we'll kind of get to look at a few of them. That was a Snaggletooth holiday special style made for originally for that Volkswagen Super Bowl spot, used often after that. The cool thing about this, Mike Thomas did the sculpt at our shop, but the tooth there, the big one, is actually a Stuart Freeborn spare tooth that he had kept. Awesome. Stuart was a pack rat, and I had from the prop store guys, Prop Store of London, gotten a whole bunch of Stuart's notes and sketches and things like that, and as well a box full of teeth and claws. And within that were Ugnaught / Wampa / Snaggletooth teeth. They were all the same kind of teeth on those tusks. And so there's a few times where we've incorporated a real production made tooth into our stuff. And I love that little extra authenticity.
So cool.
So yeah, Mosep, one of my favorite aliens, hand punched hairs on this guy and the little eyelashes and stuff. That's something I sculpted prior to the commercial. It was one of the ways I got the job for the commercial was that folks at Lucasfilm knew me just as a sculptor, knew my replicas and things like that. And when Volkswagen approached them and was like, "Oh, we want to use the Cantina aliens. Can you lend them to us?" They're like, "Well, one, we don't have those anymore.
Right.
Two, any that are around would be too brittle and fragile to wear. It's like, what you need is someone like Tom Spina who's already sculpted a lot of these." And so luckily that took. And, so thank you, Steve Sansweet and Pablo Hidalgo,
Is this mesh right under here?
There is a little mesh in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Just, and the original, it's just open.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah.
You mean they didn't have enough money to mesh back then?
Exactly.
Couldn't fit into the budget.
What's funny is we have gotten to restore the original on this, although that was years after I had made this, and knock on wood, I got pretty close just working from photos. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, who's next in the list? Yeah,
nice.
This is a big one. Physically, he's a very large piece. This is another one I had sculpted ahead of the show. We did some modifications for the show. We did very different on the tusks. We tried to capture that translucent look to them and the sort of spaghetti stuff happening behind them. It's hand-punched hair on this one. I did most of that myself. And it's interesting. There are some mistakes on this. I'm not going to call out what they are, but I see people who make this mask who incorporate details that I put in because it's what I thought I was seeing in a photo. And then eventually I got to see the real mask in the archives and figure out that, no, I was wrong. But now I see people who make it and they copy my details. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I know what pictures you're using.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I love this.
So, you'll be dead.
That's the thing. I don't think you can look at this without playing that in your mind, right?
Exactly. Yeah. This little one's not worth the effort. This is Rich Crucell for our team sculpted up the Dr. Evazan appliance. It was applied to an actor named Scott Subiano for the production. Those are silicone gums with plastic teeth. One of them is missing because an actor swallowed one on a future production. We decided not to wait for it to come back around. We said you could keep it. And behind him is one of Walrus Man's sucker hands, because he famously has the two different types of hands. My favorite thing about the Walrus Man hand thing is Pablo Hidalgo came up with this on the fly during one of our panels. He's like, what if it's like those are mittens or something, and he's like a hockey player, and he drops the gloves right before the fight, and that's why, before the fight, he's got the flippers, and after the fight, it's a real hand. And I'm like, that is so perfect. The other thing is there's 2 or 3 other aliens that all have the same goofy sucker hands, and it's like, well, yeah, somewhere in Tatooine, there's just a mitten shop making these things. They're all just wearing them. This is perfect.
I love it, dude. That's awesome.
Thank you. So this. So this was my Dr. Evasand sculpt from years before that commercial, probably, 8 or 10 years earlier. And next to him, the bartender, that I sculpted in a day. I had a break between projects, and I hadn't sculpted anything in a while, and I just said, like, I want to make something cantina-ish, like what's left. And I was flipping through the chronicles, and I think looked at a picture of the bartender, and I was just like, big mashed potato nose and scars and everything. I'm like, this guy could be fun. So I sculpted him one day, I molded him the next day, and then cast and painted one up.
How great is that, though, to be like, I'd love this in my collection. Let me go sculpt it.
It's funny.
Cool.
Everything I've made, other than where it's a pro gig, something we're doing for the shop, anything I made prior to really having the company, it was always just because I wanted it, and that's why I'm trying to keep that alive with the Regal stuff. I really am trying to focus on stuff that I can just get absorbed into, and on a creative side, just obsess over it a bit. And that's why those chess pieces were so great. It was something I loved. It was something where I got to spend this extended time with the real stuff and get to just really fall in love with it. And then to have 10 different sculpts, really 12 with the body slam, to obsess over and to really dig into. Man, I mean, that's what you want as an artist. That's what you want as as a creative. You just want to dive into this stuff. So, so to the left is one of the first cantina, full head cantina masks I ever made. Prior to that, I had made a bunch of others that were either half masks or front only, or a few where the molds failed on me. I like to joke when I learned how to sculpt, it was error and trial. And working from 2 photos, I sculpted that thing up. And the mold broke when I was trying to get the clay out of it. And I quickly put the clay back in, and I patched over the mold. So on the back of the head, there's a little faint scarring from where that was. But yeah, I mean, it's a special piece to me just for that reason alone. And I always loved that alien, and that was why I picked it. It was just such a cool design.
It's like crazy design.
Tom, can I ask, so before you excelled your skill, just at the most rudimentary point, how old were you when you first started attempting to sculpt these pieces?
So it's hard to put a direct number on it, because there's sort of stages. If you go back to me being, 6, 7 years old, I was making what I didn't realize were Pepakura paper sculptures. I was taking paper bags, and my friends would be like drawing Chewbacca's face on it, and I would cut the bags, fold things over, and staple them, and try and make like a C-3PO helmet out of it. Wow. And I'm sure, I'm looking back at this through rose-colored glasses, I'm sure they were really terrible. But there was something that my art
the drive and stuff, drive was there early on.
And it was like, I always felt like I was kind of pushing past what the art teachers were giving me. It's like, here's some paint this. And I'm like, no, but we can work in 3 dimensions, like, let's do this. So there's that. It really gets further into the 80s, probably when I'm 12 years old, 13 years old, and Tom Savini's book, Grand Illusions, aka Bizarro, depending which cover you got, comes around. And that's where I start to learn the professional materials, learn the professional techniques. I still don't have access to those materials. I'm still a kid with a paper route on Long Island with a local hardware store that I could ride my bike to and get some plaster of Paris. I couldn't get Ultracal 30. I couldn't get Hydrocal. The clay I was using was whatever was on discount from KB Toys. So that Given was sculpted in purple and green clay. I believe it was green underneath and purple on the outside. And it was just like toy plastilina clay, I didn't go to the art store and get it. And eventually I saved up some money, went to an art store, and I got some Roma plastilina and worked my way up from there to Chavant, which of course was a sulfur clay. Anyway, anybody in the business will know how that smells. And years later, I would discover Wed clay, which was a clay developed for Disney Imagineering. It's a water-based clay, but it's slower to dry, and it's absolutely amazing to work with. John Berg, who sculpted the original Given for the movie, actually, he and I had a wonderful conversation about Wed clay once, because the arc of its curing goes with you as you sculpt. It starts off so mushy and soft, and you can slap a lot of clay into place. Once you start getting your forms in place, it starts to firm up. You can get finer detail, and by the time you're ready to scratch in the textures, it's starting to get that like real tough, firm surface to it, and it like takes the journey with you, and it's such a beautiful way to put it, and it really feels like
it's almost like the oil paints of the clay and sculpting world.
It's weird. I think it's maybe a little more acrylic because it moves faster than working with oil.
I see. Okay, so
at least that's my take.
a little bit quicker. Yeah, okay,
but it definitely. Someone once said they saw some of my early sculpts. A guy who's a pro makeup guy and someone I always looked up to, and he was like, he looked at some of the stuff. He's like, "Did you switch to Wed?" And I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "What were you using before that?" I'm like, Chavant, whatever." And he goes, "It looked like you were fighting it." And he was right. I was fighting it. I didn't know how to get it to the next level, and it really was working with Wed that it just sometimes you find your medium, and it's like, and there are times where we'll use at the shop Monster Clay or Chavant, whatever. You need it for certain things, but for creature sculpts and people and things like that, man, do I love Wed. And yeah, that someone called out the holiday special sideshow.
Oh yeah. Did you see this one? Just wait for it, guys. It's coming.
The goat guy there was made by my buddy Brian Lewis, one of my absolute favorite quote fan sculpts. We used that in the Volkswagen Super Bowl spot as well, in the regular Star Wars configuration, not the holiday special look. For fun, I messed this one up and made it into the holiday special one, just to make it a little more unique. I do still want to take another copy of it someday and do the Star Wars one, but I just thought it'd be cool to have both.
That's so cool. All right, let's go to the next here, right here. Yep.
Oh yeah.
I love the eyes.
Yeah, look at those eyes. It's beautiful.
They look spot on. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one of those things where, getting to see the originals up close. These are both things that I've gotten to see up close at Bob and Kathy Burns' place. We got to help restore and preserve the Cyclops guy for him. And man, I spent a lot of time marveling at that. I call him the Anvil Head, but I believe Arcona is the species name. But it's... and we did manage to match the eyes. We managed to find the right sort of stuff in there, and the sizing and all of that, and just.
Do you know what it is? What's in there? What is?
It's a trade secret. No, they're like little translucent bead things.
Yeah. That's cool.
But it's a really cool look. And what we did is we made this with some very subtle modifications to the form, in particular around the neck, and a little bit on the top of the head, so that. And rather upper sort of low back of the head, so that it could be a wearable piece. Because the original is a little on the small side, and it's a fabricated puppet. It was just literally like, someone could tilt up and turn. By the way, have you ever noticed you can see a flashlight sticking out of the back of his head in the final cut of Star Wars?
No.
So his eyes have a twinkle to them. It's because they jammed a metal flashlight right in the back of his head. And when he comes up and he's like, and he turns, you'll see a little reflection behind him, and it's actually the back of the metal flashlight. Somewhere we found a picture where it's Lane Lisk on the floor holding it up, and you just see 2 or 3 inches of old-timey lightsaber flashlight,
I'll never be able to unsee that now. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, that's the thing
You're
about
welcome.
some of these spotlights, whether they're creator, collector, whether it's found parts or something like. Every time we do something like this, I go back and I watch Star Wars and I see it in a different way. It's amazing. It really is. It's amazing.
It's fun stuff. It's what led to it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing. Does that obsession for behind the scenes knowledge come first, or does it collecting the stuff, or is it are they somehow hand in hand?
That's so cool.
So yeah, another shelf of heads.
It's awesome.
So the devil guy is another really early one for me. That I call that my first human sculpt. Prior to that, it was all monsters and things like that. But that was one of the first times I tried to sculpt, something that resembled a person.
Right.
I always loved Rick Baker's sculpt on that. I believe he made that in 1973 originally, and it was for a movie called I Was a Teenage Vampire that John Landis was developing and then ultimately never got made. And it wound up in Bob Burns' Halloween show in 1974, and then he pulled it back out for Star Wars. What's amazing to me is it is a slip rubber mask in the movie. There's nothing fancy about this. It is the equivalent of a Don Post Halloween mask. And yet it gets a super close up with some great sound effects and a little look of Penny McCarthy's eyes. And it sells so well on screen. It's just amazing that someone pulled that off. And then next to that is Rick's early Frankenstein take. He called him, the guys kind of called him Terminal Man on set. Trinto Dwaba, I think, is the official name. I'm not real good with those. I'm good with names that end with guy. Devil guy, band guy, Batman, Bat Spider guy, demon guy, that kind of stuff. And then to the right is what Rick called Future Man. I'm assuming you guys recognize him, even though he is not painted the same way as in Star Wars.
Yeah, sure.
So they made one for Star Wars, painted it black. Rick used one of his regular sort of, quote, Future Man in that more fleshy tone in the holiday special. But that was a sculpt of mine as well. All of these are. And
so cool.
That was a fun one. It doesn't quite show from this angle. There's a little bit of Robin Williams in Future Man. I don't know why.
Yes, but especially in the black one, it stands out quite a bit.
Right? It jumps out at you. So yeah, sometimes I keep stuff like that in the back of my mind as I'm sculpting. So yeah, a couple more early ones there. So a lot of times if I had a mold, and I mean, clearly they did this in the shows too, but if you have a mold and there's multiple versions of that character, I'm gonna want them both. So there's two different Moseps, the one with the white cheek hair and the little top knot, and then the one with who's bald and just had the red hair. So this is the other variation there, and then that's one of the two Star Wars Snaggletooths there. And again, original tooth in there.
It's so cool.
So the Crocker there is by Harry Inman. He mostly offered them to folks as Bosk, but I wanted the Cantina version. And then to the right is, I believe I believe it's still technically canon as Braconner Bakiska, which was a name that we gave to it during one of the Cantina panels we did at Celebration, where we named it after a guy who won the contest in the room, Brandon Connors. And so it was Brandon Connors, Braconner, and then Bakiska was a combination of Rick Baker and Lane Liska, who worked on the scene. But that is...
The mustache is ridiculous.
Oh, it's ridiculous. So he's got a little tuft of hair on top, too. It's Terminal Man, but with different paint and with, this ridiculous mustache. And you see him in the background of some of the scenes, and people for years were like, what is that? And I looked at it and immediately was like, that's definitely the Terminal Man head, but someone put a mustache on it. And so at one point I asked Rick Baker about it, and he's just like, yeah, it's my Frankenstein, but I don't know who put that stupid mustache on it.
So funny.
He almost looks like Charles Bronson.
Oh, gosh.
Or an aged Charles Bronson.
Yeah, if you kind of, you got to cover like one side or the other. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Dude, that's funny.
So
these
are
awesome.
Cool. These
are awesome.
They're fun. So the real masks are both based on the same rubber mask, but the one on the right, Rick heavily modified to turn it into a bat demon. He calls that one Bat Demon Guy. And then the other one is just an early Halloween mask that he had made to sell, just like literally like a Halloween mask, which is what a lot of those other ones were before Star Wars. And then, it killed him that George put that brown werewolf right in the foreground. He thought it was going to be deep background. You'd never see it. It's sad that they cut the Bat Demon out, because I think that's a really cool mask. I don't think it just looks like a terrestrial werewolf. I think it's got a really cool vibe to it. And the red glowing eyes was just amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm surprised it wouldn't have been the opposite. But
right? Yeah. Like
I love the variation in the color and the hair. It's pretty.
Yeah, all the streaks and stuff, and that's we've gotten to work with the original on that mask too, and that's over at Bob's as well. And so, when the brown wolf I sculpted from photos and things like that. The one on the right, it was sculpted from photos, but it was after we had gotten to see the real one extensively, so it helped.
That's so cool.
So yeah, some other early sculpts. Technically, my first official human was the Tarkin sculpt there. Okay. If the devil guy was, unofficially human. And I did it because he was my favorite actor and because he had such sharp features. I figured if I'm going to go wrong, at least I'll have a lot of likeness to get a hook on. And so that was a lot of fun. And I always loved him in the old Hammer movies. So I tried to do one up as like the younger one too. Those are just real rough latex masks. There's nothing fancy about those. I have a sculpt going at the shop to do a bronze of Tarkin. That's still in the works. A lot of it's just down to me needing to make more hours in the day so I can find some time
is that mystery bagged item that it's always?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
I always wonder
the
what
one
that
next
is.
to like a million pictures of Peter Cushing. Yeah, that's the one. And then Frankenstein in the middle there, another just huge favorite movie of mine, and just something I had to give a shot at. That was a lot of fun to sculpt. And one of my absolute favorite Star Wars Cantina aliens, the Don Rickles alien down on the bottom, both regular style, and then in the holiday special, there's two of them. So I did one up in the other style just for the fun of it.
That's unintentional, right? That's just
It's not intended to be Don Rickles. It's just, that's what they call it.
It's a spitting image of him.
It is. So it was sculpted by Rob Bottin before Star Wars, which means he sculpted that thing when he was like probably 14 or 15. Like, because on Star Wars, he's only 16 or 17 years old.
Crazy.
Wow.
So it's just insane. It's such a good sculpt, and but I was pretty proud of what I was able to do to capture. I feel like that's one of the few that I look at and I'm not too, like, I usually cringe when I see early stuff, but that one I feel pretty good about.
That's really cool. Let's go to this one.
Yeah. There's another, if there's a variation, I want to have it. It's like, how many bites can I get out of this mold? So the outside ones are both Star Wars. The inside one is Holiday Special, which was, of course, one of the Star Wars ones modified. But that was a big thing Stuart Freeborn did. He would take one, in the case of like the two outside ones, different hair, change up the eyelids and stuff like that a little bit, and just trying and change up the paint and try and get two different looks. Almost all the aliens in that first movie, there's two of them, any of the stuff Stuart did. And I mean, it's smart. It's, everybody wants to have a friend if you're traveling the galaxy. Why wouldn't you bring somebody else with you from home? So next up, this one people ask us about a lot. This was made for a Nerdist video that we shot with Billy D. Williams. Cool. We built, I think, 27 aliens and characters for that one, or 27 costumes, and probably about 16 or 18 of those were aliens. But there's a lot that goes into making a good Greedo. So that one's sitting at the at the office.
It's interesting because some people say they want a Greedo, and then I've heard some people, I think, Jason, we talked about this, and a lot of people are like, well, it's just one color. There's no variation in the color, but you're like, but then you look at it and you're like, well, there's a lot of really cool like textures and stuff on him. Like
there is. Yeah, he doesn't need a lot of color. He is not one single color. He's got, a couple of layers and washes and stuff on top of him to pop the details. And he does have those great bug eyes.
No, those eyes are awesome.
The eyes are much more detailed than a lot of the custom pieces. The custom pieces just kind of have like a sheen over them, a silver or a gray, but his eyes are actually textured, right? Of some sort?
Yeah, there's layers and stuff going on underneath that gives you that kind of bug eye effect.
Yeah.
But cool. He's fun. He is really, really tough to make in latex, and would be even tougher in resin or something like that. So a lot of people do ask us about that one for Regal, and I always kind of back burner it. I think I do want to throw one of our Cantina guys into the mix at some point soon. It's just right now there's a lot of juggling. So
well, you're doing a lot of Jabba's Palace. It seems like that seems to be kind of like the Rancor, and then I mean, really it's just You know what
Which
I mean?
is
It's
weird
kind of cool
for the cantina guy to be,
yeah,
doing
well, yeah,
Jabba's Palace
sure,
stuff.
sure.
But it's also about, with Jabba's Palace, you had more of the puppet scale stuff and more of the
Right.
maquette stuff.
Right.
Whereas the cantina, everything is really one-to-one. But yeah, I'm anxious to put some aliens into the mix.
Right. Well, I guess I'm thinking CZ3, right? Because CZ3 is there, but he's not. That's not necessarily the one you did.
Yeah,
yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. I would love a Greedo at some point. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, just some other early stuff of mine. A lot of it, as you can see, a lot of the stuff on my shelves is just stuff I made over the years.
Yeah, that's cool though.
But I love American Werewolf, and the Twilight Zone episode, Eye of the Beholder, scared the ever-living crap out of me as a kid. So sometimes you've got to sculpt something to get it out of your brain, and that was one of those. That's another one. I did that. That's probably a year or two before I did the Tarkin, and it really was about like exercising that demon, I think. So cool. And then the David from American Werewolf was just trying to capture the pop of that moment and trying to do some expression stuff and have some fun.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Oh, and the cantina thing there, that was also, that one is also the 2012 Super Bowl spot. That was one of the remnants from the bar.
Oh, cool. Man, you really that's cool that you got to keep some of that stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really neat.
So this is some neat stuff from American Werewolf. This is stuff that Rick had in his basement for years after, and some Polaroid surface that kind of showed what this stuff was used for. They're foam-filled slip latex pieces that were used for them to test the concept of doing the wheelbarrow. And if you go to the next slide, I think it kind of shows the Polaroids there. So the way that they did the wolf was like a guy on a wheelbarrow with someone puppeteering the back legs, and you could see his legs coming out of the butt of that thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so they put someone in this thing on that plank and walked him around a parking lot to see if it would work. This head and legs were what was used in that. Like, it still had the duct tape on it and everything, and it was a really cool piece. And there's I got to restore the original wolf costume, and it was just really nice to have a piece of that now. I was blown away that this stuff still existed, and to have a chance to have it in the collection is pretty cool.
Dude, that's funny.
Yeah, that is. It's interesting.
Wow.
This next slide, no one's gonna like.
No, of course not.
Oh, skip this picture, man.
Yeah.
We should just skip these things.
All right, I'm out. See ya. Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint everyone.
Well, we have close-ups on these ones too, so people.
Yeah. So I mean, but if you going back, that does kind of show. That's my if there's. So, the way I see it, the more important a piece is, whether it's because the piece has value monetarily or value to the collector, the more important it is, the more air it needs around it.
Sure.
It instantly tells you that this thing matters to someone just by that nature of it having some air around it. So to me, I wanted to have a clear differentiation when you go from stuff that we've made for commercials or stuff that I made or friends made or whatever, to stuff that is maybe used in the movie and more important to me personally. Maybe there's more of a story behind it, whatever. And so to me, the way to do that is you just add that extra bit of air around all these pieces, and that's where getting some pedestals and individual cases come in. Not every piece warrants that, and sometimes you just don't have the room to do it. But I actually, in creating a collection like that, you are condensing prior to that. Nobody just jumps in and has a bunch of screen used stuff. So, prior to this, that wall was crowded. That whole wall was loaded with replica props, MR stuff, smaller screen used props from Star Wars and indie, tons of indie props at one point. And tons of replica stuff. And just eventually, the section of that stuff got whittled down, and then this stuff started to just take over that space.
Well, Jason, we've talked about this, right?
Yeah.
The whole idea of
I was gonna say,
curating.
Matt. That's what I was gonna say. So me and Matt have discussed this. We all have a few times, and we always say that you reach a point in time in your collection where, when you start off, you have this mentality of, I want it all. There's so many amazing things out there. I just want to
Fill
amass so many
shelves,
things.
fill the shelves, fill
Right.
the shelves.
Yeah.
And then what
Absolutely.
happens is the opposite. I feel like as the collection, progresses, it actually gets
Matures.
smaller. Matures, yes.
Yeah.
Great way is the thing. It actually gets smaller, not bigger, and you
Yeah.
tend to collect less and curate more.
Yeah.
When you're putting your collection. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as I like to say, you start to buy more Regal robot products. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Right.
But it is, and that's an element that we try and bring to what we're doing too.
For sure.
There's these talks with you guys are so much like me and all my friends who collect, whether it's screen use, props, replicas, whatever. We all hang out and have these conversations. This is the talks that go well into the middle of the night and beyond with all my collector buddies, and it really, I think there's a lot of us that are on the same journey, and I think having that background and that mindset is something that I try to keep in mind as we develop stuff with Regal, especially the high end stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, this is all stuff that's pretty special to me. Those are actually,
this stuff is great. These are the original sketches and drawings, and
I mean, to me, this is something that this is a character that that hasn't turned up out of all these other ones that are still around. There's some that are just gone, and to see John's early take on it, sketching out on the right side is sketching out the mech for the eyes and things like that. And on the left side, the profile of the character and trying to work out, maybe some mechanism to get some movement out of the arm and stuff like that. And then bottom left is some IMAX. And then top left is some great little just doodle aliens, which is just fantastic to me. I absolutely love that stuff.
Isn't it crazy, though, that how would these people expect that their doodles and, just random sketches would be worth something someday? It's just It's crazy.
Yeah. Not even that it's worth something, but like, oh wow, 45 years from now, someone's going to want to put this on their wall in a nice frame, with a UV glaze and all of that. It's a little nuts.
It's amazing,
it is
man.
a little nuts.
It's amazing.
Tore the bottom right corner of the paper off to fold up his gum in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. 100%. Yeah.
That's funny, man.
All right.
Dude,
it was probably like
funny.
some key piece of the drawing too that got torn away.
It's so funny.
he was writing down his number for some chick.
Right. Yeah.
That's so cool.
So yeah, I just took a kind of a snapshot of each of these guys. I kind of went through and this. I mean, not a lot to be said here.
Well, there's plenty to be said. It's a cantina alien. I mean, my goodness.
I mean, probably the alien from that scene.
Sure.
We got to make this for Sideshow too. We got to do a sculpt of it. Me and Brian Lewis kind of each sculpted half. And I felt like, when they were doing that stuff, I'm like, that's the one to do. Like, that's the one that if you see one alien, you just, that's Star Wars.
Right.
And I got to see one of these on display in Disney World at MGM Studios. The building just past Star Tours. It's now Pizza Rizzo. It used to be Buzz Lightyear Pizza Planet. Nondescript brick building at the time. But they had a prop display in there. And I rounded the corner. No idea what was in there. My buddy and I walk in. We're huge Star Wars nerds. Not like now. Like we were nerds.
Of course not.
Yeah, no. But not like you guys. I'm talking nerds.
No.
But and in there is to the left the mine cars from Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, full-size mine cars with full-size guys dressed in thuggy outfits like mannequins and dummies in there. There's some of the animals from the circus train in Last Crusade. There's some big Death Star pieces on the wall. There's stuff from the Rocketeer. There's the two speeder bikes, screen-used speeder bikes that they had prior to them being repainted by the theme park people too. So still with like original paint. And on a pedestal, in a case, cantina band head. And I'm like eye to eye with this thing. And, here's where you're gut checking, because this is now, I don't know, 1990, 91. I've probably got 24 pictures that I can take for the whole trip. I'm down there for a week, and I've got to make one roll of 110, film last.
110. Oh my gosh.
And
I
so
get pictures of rolling it back. It's in slow motion.
Yeah.
Matt, do you even know what 110 is? Was that before your time?
Probably, yeah.
So I took a picture of the cantina band guy, and I took a picture of the speeder bikes. And I'm so mad that I didn't go out, take whatever money I was going to use for dinner and pay for another roll of film at the convenience counter there and go back in and take pictures of everything. But I would look at that picture and I would like, one day I'm going to sculpt one of these and then I'll have one, and never did I think, someday that I would get to know the folks that made them for the movie, or that someday I'd get to have one. Like it's crazy. It's crazy to even think about.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Tom, Andy Everson asks, which was the first screen use mask that you had acquired for your collection?
If we're talking Star Wars, it's the pickle-headed guy. It's called the Plutonian in all the production paperwork. Nabran Leeds, I guess, is what you would call him officially. But the guy with the big pickle head and the gas mask at the bar.
Yeah, we'll come up to
and
that.
I've still got him, and we'll show you a pic of him momentarily.
Yeah. Next one is
so that's the real mask of the first thing I sculpted, which is again kind of crazy. And there's a thing that screen use collectors do where you try and screen match something,
right?
Where you can say, oh, this is mine. With the cantina band guy, there's actually there's a tell. One of his eyebrows didn't get the shading that all the other ones did. And there's a great picture of Doug Beswick holding one of the masks in front of all the others. And it's his right eyebrow is missing the shading. You can't really see it there, but you see on the left, there's the blue shading. Under his right, our left, his right should have been a little bit of blue, and it's not there. And also the necks are all trimmed a little differently because they're trimmed by hand. And there's this great shot of Doug. He's in his own garage, all 7 masks. He's holding one of them. The one he's holding doesn't have the eyeshadow. And I look, and the neck trim matches, and some of the neck paint, and I'm like, that one's mine. Like I love being able to match something up to a picture. And with a Given, it's the same way. There's something in the way the mouth was cut, where there's a little niddly bit of latex is hanging off. It's the sort of thing, you can't see it in this photo, but like it's the sort of thing you would just go in and, it's like, it wasn't a perfectly clean cut, and you just pick it off later or something like that. But they didn't. And in some of the photos that are in like the Chronicles and Lucasfilm Archives, if you get a high resolution version of that photo, you can see that cut. And it's just, okay, this is that mask.
That's crazy.
And that's just, it's rare that you can have that kind of match. But as a prop collector of anything that's used in a movie, that's your goal. You want to match some behind the scenes picture, or you want to match the movie.
Tom, what how do you have to do to keep these things from not just falling apart?
Yeah, so first things first, call Tom Spina Designs. Go to TomSpinaDesigns.com. It's not a sales pitch. We just want to preserve stuff. Realistically, for latex, a lot of it is environmental and a lot of it is support based. So the material, gravity loves to pull on stuff. So you position it in a way to minimize that. Usually that's angling the thing back a little bit. Sometimes it's adding additional support inside the mask. So we'll find areas that are going to be stress points over the years and add fabric patches on the inside of the mask just to help it survive, or to build a support inside that supports a snout, so that the snout doesn't pull and break at the bridge of the nose, et cetera, et cetera. It's also about using archival materials when you're making your inserts. It's about using archival materials when you're doing any of those repairs. And then it's keeping dust off it, keeping hands off it, because the skin oils are bad for latex.
So when company comes over, you definitely don't pop this out and put it on. And,
no.
I'm kidding.
But I won't say that I've never put these on when they first arrived. But I will not say that. But
Well, you gotta at least smell it or something. You just have to have that closeness, right?
But the other thing is, so you're keeping hands off of it. You're keeping it out of UV. That's crucial. You're keeping it out of high heat. That's a real killer for latex. And, UV can be incidental. I always say if there's enough light in the room to see, you're getting too much UV, and it's not just, and it's true because it rhymes. But so, I encourage folks, if they're not going to use UV cases, put UV filtering on your windows in your collecting room.
Right.
It's a cheap fix. You get it at Home Depot for $10 or $20 a roll. You can do all the windows with a roll of it. And it's a great way to help preserve the colors on anything, whether it's, latex piece or your photographs, autographs.
Even modern pieces. Yeah, that's what I've done with my windows. We have the covering.
Yeah, it's a good call. It's a good call.
Tom, tell me, so there, there's a lot of new companies out there making the amazing busts and latex, all this crazy stuff, right? So, I mean, how long are these things going to last for people that are collecting these things? Like, because they're expensive and they're crazy, right? Like,
well, it's funny. Some of the times I see them and I think they're cheap.
Sure. But
it's so different coming in from the mindset of working on something for a production versus for a collection.
Right.
And it's why a lot of our Regal pieces are resin.
Right.
And it's with that mindset of, I don't want people to have to struggle to care for this stuff. I don't want it to deteriorate over time. We've all seen things like a lot of the elusive concept stuff that gets pretty rough over time.
Right.
Some of it is where you do have to use these materials, casting it real thick, supporting it inside with things like foams and stuff like that to help support it over time. But you can never put a number on this stuff in terms of time. There's so many factors that go into it. How it was made, what particular mix of latex you got at the time. If it's silicone, what type of silicone is it? How is it supported? How is it treated through the process? There's
how it's displayed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough.
Interesting.
It just goes to show the other factors that go into collecting. It's not just finding a piece that you like, and there's a lot more elements that go into.
Care. You're a caretaker for it ultimately.
Correct, yeah.
That's what we are on these things. Interestingly enough, we had to think about, so the big green guy's shirt in the chess set is latex on the originals. And so what we wound up using is it's actually a neoprene, which is an artificial latex that isn't as prone to break down over time, and it holds up better to UV and stress and all of that stuff. So on that element, we're still getting the feel of that rubber, but it is particularly made to last. And that's just, maybe that's just the thought process that comes from someone who spends so much time repairing this stuff.
Sure.
But it's something that we try to think ahead of on this stuff, where we do have to have a rubber element. Well, let's try and use something that's going to hold up. We can kind of flip through here because it's, I think, pretty self-explanatory again. This is a special piece too, because this was probably my favorite Alien, and also the one that scared me the most as a kid. I had the storybook where there's a 2-page spread, and it's the shot of the two of them looking at the camera.
Right.
And oh man, talk about like the page. You'd like turn the page at 5 and just kind of be like, But I always loved the way they displayed the masks and hands in the Chronicles pictures, where they would. There's those great shots of the Duros masks where you've got the head and then the two hands sideways like that. So what we actually did here is made wire and archival material mounts for these hands that then go back and mount in behind the head and can hold them vertically like that without stressing the piece. And then the head is on a totally custom mount. And Maria at the studio did some very light repair stuff to some of the wrinkles behind the ears where they had split. Not what we would call restoration, where we're filling in the cracks, but literally just binding back together stuff that did match up at one point, but it just stressed back over time.
That's a fantastic display right there.
Thank you.
It is. It's awesome.
It's a big case. It takes up a lot of room.
John has a question. Tom, do we need to be careful of UV exposure for the chest?
You have to be careful of UV exposure for anything that has paint on it. It's that simple. We put a clear coat on everything, and it has some UV filtering. But honestly, I wouldn't leave anything painted in the sun or in a room that gets a lot of sun.
Got it.
Andy, I see your question as well. That color is darker than it was originally. The hands are a little closer maybe, but it definitely grayed out a bit. It's tough to photograph in the color. Like the color of this photo in general is a little muted, but it is darker than it was. And some of that is down to latex. Over time, latex can darken. And if you're using specific types of paint, it can darken further. And again, we don't know how this was stored or displayed the entire time.
Right.
Before I had it, it might have been exposed to some sun. And masks literally can get a suntan.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
This is great.
So, yeah.
This piece is wild. Look at that.
It's crazy. And there's stuff on this that once you see it in person that you can pick up in photos and things. What was great about this was I knew it very well from the pictures from the Chronicles, where it was only ever shown in black and white and one really weird muted color pick where it looked kind of brown. And then to see it in person, it's brightly colored. It's got all these bright greens and reds and blues on it. It was really cool to see. This was something that Stuart Freeborn had saved. Prop store years ago, early 2000s. Helped he and Stuart and Kay Freeborn, who were moving to a small cottage, help find places for stuff that they had kept in their attic and in their workshops and stuff like that. And I was very lucky to be among the people that helped find homes for this stuff and to even to get to go and dig through some of this stuff in England, to make the trip out and to go through boxes of teeth and claws and fur and identify like, oh, this is Wampa hair, that's Ewok fur, this is, these are Wampa teeth. That's, amazing stuff to be a part of. And
now, Tom, on this piece particular, can I ask? So with the eyes, I can't tell through the imagery if that's a paint effect or if that's a material that's giving a light.
I always thought it was actually three-dimensional sort of noodles, like rows of noodles from the way it looks in the Chronicles photos in particular. Yeah. It's actually it is a trick of the light. It's like these big I don't mind giving it away. It's giant like sequins almost in rows, and it creates this weird prismatic effect. And then you have the fishnet over top. It really looks very dimensional. It's actually a very big, smooth shape on both sides, but it's an amazing effect.
It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
And along with this is one of the things that I love. You go to the next shot. Is this came with, and this is something prop store is really good at. They love pairing up notes and sketches and things with original props. So they like to keep the story together. So these are like Stuart and probably Graham Freeborn's sketches and notes about the character. There's even some grasshopper sketches in there, which was another alien that never got made. But there's actually another sort of checklist that would have that has like, Stuart must have gone home for the night and was like, put brown flock on this, make sure it has that, paint this, and it's really cool to go through. I've got a stack, probably 30 or 40 pages of Stuart's notes for the cantina. And it's everything from his first meeting notes with George, where he's laying out possible characters that George is throwing out there and putting his own in there. A bat alien, a rat alien. Everything's very terrestrial. Cow aliens, hippo. And you can then start to piece them off. You're like, oh, the hippo is the hair mouse guy. The cow is Snaggletooth. The bat is Cabe. The rat is Regisk, or whatever they call the rat. The wasp is the big picklehead guy. And you really start to go through and you're like, oh, yeah, Stuart's stuff was all so terrestrial, but still really well done and interesting. I see Conjure Club is asking about argon gas double pane windows. I all I can say is check with your manufacturer. I don't know that argon gas itself provides any UV filtering offhand. I would, check with the manufacturer of the windows. And if they say there isn't, a really high level of it, I'd consider putting some film on it. And there are UV films that are clear. So, it literally is just like putting a layer of content on these things.
Tom, you've got everyone worried about UV now. So,
well, good.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, we've discussed that. I mean, it's the number one, it's detrimental to almost anything.
Number one. Yep.
So I sometimes find, I got to say, so with these notations and these drawings and sketches, and some of the things that are just done on the fly as they're working through things sometimes are just as interesting, if not
on the
more.
fly, huh? That's great,
Yeah.
Jason. Nice
No pun
there.
intended. But I didn't pick up on
Good
that.
pun.
But I sometimes find them just as interesting, if not more, than some of the props. It's amazing because
fascinating stuff.
it's you're getting a little walk through the mindset at that particular moment in time.
Right. Yeah. How did they get from here to there, and
Yes.
and to see it, to see the evolution? I absolutely love that stuff.
John says that explains why you're so pale. All that UV.
That was a good one. I was trying to pull out.
Okay.
Oh, that's
I
good.
deserve that.
That's good.
fine.
That's good.
Yeah, that's
fine.
fine. I'm sorry. What was his last name? Heffernan. Okay, let me just.
Yeah.
Let me cancel his order.
All right. You know.
That's awesome.
So yeah, Walrus Man's blaster. It's actually not the blaster you see on the floor. This is his UK shoot blaster. And it's shown in the original cut of the cantina scene on the floor back when he had the big flipper hand. But they reshot that shot with a werewolf hand that Rick Baker had, and a different gun. It was actually the stunt version of Evazon's gun, that must have been sent back to the US. This was kept in the UK because it was a gun that was rented from Bapti. And this is really neat because, so it didn't come with the red handle or the scope. That was, stuff that was added later to complete it. A lot of times something goes into a rental house, it comes back, it gets stripped down to its base parts, and it goes into the shelves.
Got it, yeah.
So it did come with the end bit there, the flare, which is actually off of a grenade. It came with I believe the end of the scope, and the scope clamp, but it didn't have the scope itself. So we found the right scope. We fabricated the handle. A friend of mine made that. And then what's neat, though, is the gun has a serial number on it, and you can match that to production photos.
Oh, wow.
Crazy.
Which is just, what more can you ask for when you have something like that?
That's so cool.
So, yeah, the other corner here is, more Freeborn stuff. It's funny, I'm so organized with stuff that if you'll note, the first three aliens were all Baker aliens. So you had like the Hammerhead sketch, the Cantina Band guy, the Given, Duros, all that's Baker alien stuff. And then you transition to the Fly, the Walrus Man blaster, now Picklehead and Greedo hands and Snaggletooth, all Freeborn stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, if we go through, I'll kind of...
Dude, the Plutonian is such a good name.
Isn't it? It's so great.
Name.
One of my favorite things is if you watch the movie, the actress in the costume would take that noodle hanging off the gas mask and put it into the top of the drink.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is perfect.
Oh, that's right.
Of course. How do you drink if you're in a gas mask? You have a special snout. So it's the original mask, screen used hands, a pair of spare hands that Stuart had. I assume, it was a 4-armed creature. I assume the extra arms probably went back to the rental house with it and, are just never seen again. What else here? I don't mean to rush past stuff.
No,
I don't want to take all night on you guys.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Thank you. And that was, the first person who asked. That was the first one. That was real special. And it came from Stuart. And I actually got a picture of Stuart sitting on the episode 1 couch, the red couch from episode 1, holding that mask. And he and Kay signed it to me.
So cool.
It's just like, that's such a great thing to have with it.
Such great sentimental value, like you mentioned. That just adds so much more to it.
Yeah, I owe a lot to the prop store folks for really, obviously they have a dog in the hunt when it comes to getting people into the hobby, but at the time it really was a narrow group of us, and they were, there's a core group of friends that developed at that time that are still really tight, and they actually, while I was out, they helped connect me with Stuart and Kay, and we got to go to this great long dinner on one night. We went to a little curry house around the corner from their cottage. He was 90, Stuart, at the time. We went in at 7 p.m. We left after midnight. And the entire time, he was telling stories about his 50 years in makeup, and just...
Crazy.
There was 50 plus years, really mind blowing. Yeah, 2001, stuff with Peter Sellers, stuff with Charlie Chaplin, Jane Mansfield, all these great stories. And then, of course, Star Wars and all of that, too, and Yoda and Chewbacca and everything. And just, here's idol of idols and sitting there and having a meal and listening to him and Kay talk. Oh, gosh, I could have done that for another 5 hours.
That's so cool. And the Greedo hands.
Yeah. Basically, the equivalent of dish gloves,
He looks
with long fingers and suckers. But they're awesome. So I'll keep
so
them.
Neat. Did you have to restore any stuff on this? Like, was there any paint coming off or?
No, these were pretty good. There's some little areas where they've got some paint loss, but I like that in a screen use piece. If there's some history to it. Pardon me, if it's really bad, if it really detracts from how it's displays, or if it's damaged dramatically after production type damage, then maybe that's something I look at. But I tend to try and keep things pretty original. So John Heffernan, generally just standard UV acrylic covers do have a very small amount of UV protection. I don't know the percentage offhand. I want to say it's like 5 or 10%.
It's very small, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a lot, and so looking into other outlets is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the boxes that those Greedo hands sit on are really neat too. They were the boxes that Stuart Freeborn had Snaggletooth and the gas mask head in. So you opened those up and you would have seen the Snaggletooth head or the pickle head in there. Crammed into the box, gas mask off. What's neat is that even with that gas mask being a vintage found item, you can screen match that to the production photos. It's stamped and it's got some little tears and things like that, and it's just all of this stuff matches up perfectly, all of the threads and everything. And it's just amazingly lucky that they kept that gas mask with it all these years.
It's a cool, interesting thing to have in your collection. That's cool.
Yeah, even this is a fun little.
Thank you. It was the sort of thing, and again, this is the sort of Prop Store could have thrown stuff like this out. They could have gone and helped Stuart clean up and just be like, get rid of those boxes. But they knew there's something to it, and to have that together, it's just, I think it's really cool to keep that stuff together, and I love using it as a little bit of a pedestal there too.
Yeah, that's what Cece was saying those would have been the first to go, kind of a thing.
Yeah, you would think it would just have a piece of gaffer tape over the word Snaggletooth and something else written on it from some future movie.
Exactly.
Something from Haunted Honeymoon or whatever. So yeah, these are neat because this was in the box of teeth. And when you look at the sketches for the John Molo sketches for the cantina scene, there was a character called the Grasshopper. And it was one of the ones that didn't get finished in time when Stuart got sick. The next picture, I think, is a little more of a shot of just the paper sketch. So this was a sketch that Stuart had. And the bottom sketch there is just a print of the sketch that John Molo did. And, you start to look and you start seeing these little things. And when you start talking to people that worked on it, they're like, oh, yeah, we had some elements that were made, but the head never got finished. And so in this box of teeth and claws and things were these 2 green antennae with some wire running through them, fishing line. And the best guess is these were parts of this last creature that never got done. And I just think it's a neat thing to keep with the sketch that Stuart did there.
Well, it's cool because
whoever made that sketch.
You see where we see where the person's supposed to be.
Yeah,
and all that.
You see the size of it, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
So.
I like that. This is very relevant.
Yeah.
To the current situation.
Yeah, this is one of those things that is somewhat recent. I haven't bought something in a long, long time. Most of the stuff that's in my collection has been there for decades.
Sure.
This was something I actually moved a whole bunch of Star Trek stuff to bring in. I still love Star Trek.
Choice.
Good
What's
choice.
that?
Wise choice.
I still do love Star Trek, especially original series stuff. But to the right, that's the original armature for the main chess guy, the big green guy, as Phil Tippett calls him, the Mantelian Savrip. And talk about a great reference point when we then go to start making ours.
Of course.
There's your way to figure out the scale. To the left is the actual puppet that was on this armature before Star Wars. So Phil Tippett had made this armature when he was 17, and he put that character to the left was built over it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, 17, right? I told him the same thing. I was like, I was lucky I could sculpt in clay from KB Toys at 17.
Seriously.
But what he had done is he had built that character on the armature. He sliced up the back of this character, pulled the armature out of it, and then reused it to make the guy that eventually winds up in Star Wars. And he had that guy on a shelf in the back when they were working on the cantina. And eventually George saw that, and that was the real spark to doing the holochess as stop motion pieces. But Phil had kept that puppet. It was in kind of rough shape. He had actually kept a casting of the head, which was gone other than the bits of fur. So he this eventually came to me, and we did just a very light restoration. You could see we even kept like the feet are missing, the hands are missing. We took a casting of that head and put the head back in place and put the hairs back on just to at least visually complete it. But just really cool to see. And as you see, it just shows how that scaling works out. Other than the fact that he's a little forward, the sizing on our replicas just match up perfectly. That's so cool. One of our pieces to the right.
That armature would make a great future piece for Regal to make.
It really would.
It would if they weren't so expensive to make with a pro armature maker.
Really? Is it that crazy?
Oh yeah. It's funny. I mean, I've seen a few people who look at our chess pieces and they're like, "Oh, for that price, they should all be, fully stop motional and silicone."
Right.
And I'm like, you couldn't get one armature for the price of our full set. You'd be lucky to get half an armature at that price.
Tom, with that being said, these all have to be hand machined, handmade.
Yep. Yeah,
it's not like a production. It's all done by hand.
You don't go to Home Depot and say like, all right, I need 2 hip joints with a swivel. I need a double neck joint for a guy that can sling his head real low.
I figured you could cast it or something, but okay.
Yeah, Sideshow tried to do that with the Bob Burns King Kong armature, and I had one of those for a while. They were pretty cool, but over time, the metal just kept giving out because cast metal isn't the same as machined steel. And no matter how tight you would make the joints, it would still just start to slip. And I kept coming into the display room and he'd be, kind of falling over. It was an awesome idea, but it's just the way there wasn't a real way to make that work that way.
You said he was how old when he made this?
17.
So how did he make it when he was 17?
He milled everything out of steel.
He milled it. Yeah.
Wow.
Metal shop.
Crazy.
Yeah, he took metal shop in school and junior college. And he said, it's funny because he thinks of this as really crude. And I mean, compared to some other stuff, maybe. But, he talks about when he met, guys like Tom Spina and Doug Beswick and all of those guys and just kind of said like, oh, good, you guys are good at this. I'm going to go back to making wrinkly monsters now.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It came in at a really fortunate time, and it's something that I think probably fed into my obsession with these characters.
That's really special, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's
incredible.
Yeah, I do. When I do ultimately display this, my idea is I'll have the original piece that was on there. I'll have the armature, and then next to it, I'm going to do one of our Mr. Big guys there in the back, but all in gray, because I really want the armature to be the standout in that display. And not upstage it. I'm still going to have a set of the characters, that's its own thing. But as this display, I love the idea of showing it in context, showing some visual completion to it, but not taking away from the fact that the armature is what's real in this display. That's the thing to look at, or maybe the old puppet on the left. But don't immediately start looking at the finished puppet and going, how cool is that?
Fantastic.
So cool.
Oh, yeah, Snaggletooth. So that's another replica head by me, but he's on the real costume. And of course, he does have another real tooth from the Boxo teeth. And you can't just go to, the retail mannequin display and find yourself a hunchback mannequin. So that is a custom mannequin that was made for this display. It does screen match to the guy in the streets. The stitching and the ruching on the bib of his gi there matches up. The kerchief underneath and the boots are not original, but the pants and the shirt are. And generally, I don't like to put a replica head on a display. But sometimes when it's a monster, it can work.
Looks great.
And thank you. I felt like in this case, it worked pretty good. And this is, this was a display that took me a long time to put together because I found the shirt before I found the pants. And the idea that you could find one piece of costuming from the cantina was amazing. To find two is just like insane. And it started with the shirt that turned up on eBay, of all places.
Oh, wow.
And usually it's like, something's on eBay. Okay, 99% of the time you get any closer to any bit of a closer look to it, and then you're just like, oh, okay, that's fake. But it was tagged. The tag was right. The fabric was right. The age and timing was, all right. The collector's story was pretty good, and I took a chance. It wasn't that expensive, and I gave it a shot. And so this is probably like 2001, maybe 2002. And sure enough, it checks out. There's certain ways that when you have something like that where it's a custom garment made for the movie, there's ways that they sew stuff for movies, and there's ways that certain companies sew stuff. So, you really, having friends that had other stuff from Star Wars, you can match up the tag, you can match up the numbers on the tag, the way this tag is stitched on, the placement of it, the type of stitching inside the garment, stuff like that all checks out. And then suddenly you're really confident about a piece. And then a few years later, a fair number of years later, actually, Angel's costumers, which used to be Berman's, which is the ones who did the stuff for the film, had an auction. And in the auction, they noted they had snaggletooth trousers. And
crazy.
I just, that's when you just kind of look and you go like, could it be? Like of all the things they had, the only, they had like 3 or 4 things from Star Wars, and one of them are the pants that I need,
Wow.
So I wound up picking those up at auction, and very luckily, not a lot of people bid on them, so it didn't hurt too bad. But it was just so cool to be able to put those two back together and to be able to say like, oh, wow, this, before it was a shirt, now it's a costume, Like,
oh, it looks great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy.
I love
That's a story of amazing luck. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The chances of that are
like astronomically small. Yeah, I still can't believe that those things both exist and are together, and that there's so few other bits of wardrobe from that scene out there. It's nuts. Some non-Star Wars stuff here. Tick, that's a screen-used costume from the Patrick Warburton show, and that's a screen-used Rocketeer costume there. The pack and the helmet are what they would call production-made, but not screen-used. So made by the same people for the movie, but not used in the film. And that's a mannequin that we did at the shop. This is the thing we do a lot of. Someone comes to us with a unique costume, and we do a custom mannequin to display it. Right. I didn't have a lot of height, so I kept the base small, short, really, but I still wanted an element of theming, so we did just a touch of deco in there, a little bit of distressed gold, a little bit of layering. Very simple, but it really just gives you that little bit of the feel of the movie. I went handless because I didn't want to call attention to anything but the costume. The boots, the pants, the jacket, all screen used, and then again that production made helmet and pack, and the helmet's amazing. We've gotten to handle a bunch of the screen used helmets and packs, and there's so many replicas out there. It's really nice when you get to see the screen used stuff and it all matches. The paint's the same, the interior, the resin tone, the color of the resin, the age of it, all matches up.
I love the coloring of the coat, how it's sort of breaking up, and
yeah, well, it's faded along the shoulders.
Yeah,
because of our friend UV. It was hanging on a hanger in a big warehouse with probably fluorescent lights over top. And so it doesn't get it on the front and back, but all along the top, that's where it would be shining down.
Well, with in most cases, that would be, this particularly with the Art Deco sort of, style look to it with the color scheme, it kind of fits, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. It's not that drastic in person either. And I wonder if there's also some element of just, old leather being on a hanger, if there's some element of like, is the dye running away? Is gravity pulling on it? But I really think it's probably just straight up UV.
Now, fun little note about this is Joe Johnston directed Rocketeer, who did a lot of work for.
Yep.
I mean, most
of
of
the major designers.
For everything, a lot of stuff for Star Wars.
I love the aesthetic of the movie. I love the film. I think it's so much fun. It's just it was a good opportunity to add this to the collection. This came through a trade with a good friend. So
great piece.
Really
Tom, question. So what about I know, like, so I don't know how you light certain things in your collection. What about light? Does light give off any? Does it mess?
I mean,
anything
it depends
up?
what light you're using. As long as stay away from any of the stay away from halogens for heat, and stay away from compact fluorescent or any kind of fluorescent for UV. I use very low wattage, either incandescent or LED, depending on the area in the room. Okay. I'm basically in the process of changing it all over to LED at this point. Okay. LED seems to put out the lowest amount of that. Incandescent isn't very bad at all. But I'm also not blasting stuff with light. You probably notice in most of the room pics. Right. It's, the phone actually makes it, because I shot these on my phone. The phone makes the room look much brighter than it is. Right. It's mostly just little track spots everywhere. And it's a nice feel when it's a little dim in the room and you can kind of focus light on things.
Sure. Yeah. No, like it's just an interesting idea that over a certain amount of time, what's going to do what to, I mean, some of these pieces, they cost what they cost, and we want to keep them safe.
And there's value even beyond price too.
Right, exactly.
There's one of a kind. Like, what are you going to do with that given mask? There isn't another one.
Right.
So if it's in my collection, I've got to do my best to keep it around.
It's preservation as well.
Yeah. And I'm fortunate in that, my business, other than Regal Robot, where most folks know me, is maintaining original props, conserving original props for Lucasfilm Archives, for the Henson Archives, for myself. It is a little bit of the cobbler's kid has no shoes. There's so many of my displays that are a little bit haphazard or a little less than I would want them to be, mainly because we just get so tied up in our other work that, it's always like, oh yeah, when we get time, we're going to make that Rocketeer mannequin for Tom. That sat in my studio for about 3 years before we made that mannequin, because we're just always so busy making other people's stuff, and I don't want to have somebody else wait, because I'm like, no, I need the kids to play with daddy's toys for a bit. Like, no, we'll make your thing, and then we'll get to mine eventually.
Yeah.
And yes, Spoon. Thank you, John Heffernan. Heffernan. Sorry. So this is fun. I loved the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My favorite character on the show was Seth Green's Oz. I just thought he had the most wonderful, obtuse asides and things like that. And so this is one of his werewolf costumes for that character. And there's some makeup appliances and actually the original teeth next to it as well.
That's so cool.
It's just, sometimes there's random stuff that comes through. I'm a sucker for werewolves, as you can see here. So yeah. That's another piece that came from Stuart. This actually came through with the Fly alien, believe it or not, along with a script and some makeup notes and stuff from the movie. And it's one of those movies not a lot of people know and love. I really do enjoy it. And there's something a bit Chewbacca-ish about this particular werewolf. I'm fairly sure he's haired with like leftover Chewbacca hair, Well,
even the pattern in which it comes out is specific to how Chewbacca's kind of hairs up over
that's Stuart's understanding of hair growth, and it really is. It's accurate when you look at Chewbacca. It's there's a few things that work against an anatomical accuracy, but there's a lot of stuff that happens around the brow that is exactly how, if you're hand punching eyebrows, it's the direction you change as you do your eyebrows. It's interesting to see that for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a signature there that you can see.
Yeah,
this is a radical piece.
This is crazy.
The movie Top Secret, another favorite dumb movie of mine, but the gag where Peter Cushing has his the big magnifying glass up to his eye, and then he takes it away, and he's got a giant eyeball. Luckily, Stuart had kept a bunch of the practice eyes and this makeup test that he did on a bust of Peter Cushing that he made off of a life cast. And I was able to pick up the one of the test eyes, which is the one on the little display on the ethifoam on the bottom left there, and the test head, which it's funny, this is probably a good example of our kind of conservation versus restoration. This was a piece that was in about this condition when I got it, cracked, drying, some missing paint. And what we did was conserve the piece. This has been, all of the cracks and paint bits that were loose have been bound and glued down, and then the whole piece has been sealed with a flexible sealer, and almost no touch-up paint in that process. Everything is still kind of as it was, but we've just sealed it up, preserved it for time, made it much more or less likely to flake and break down. And but it still looks old. It feels old. You know exactly that this isn't some replica someone made. Nobody's doing that. And if you, I believe the next shot should be the life cast, or that's the eyeballs came in a little box that just said Peter Cushing eyeball, and I'm saving this box. There's no way I'm not keeping that box. But it did come with the life cast.
Crazy.
So this is Peter Cushing's, 1-to-1 first generation life cast that Stuart Freeborn made of Peter, my favorite actor. There are copies of this life cast around, but they're all shrunken. They all lack detail. This is one step away from having touched his face. The materials.
That's crazy. It looks so cool.
The detail on it is amazing, and there's a little more story to this, because when ILM started putting together things for Rogue One, someone poked their head into a friend of mine's office and said, "Where can I get the head of Peter Cushing?" And he said, "I know a guy." So we made a copy of this life mask, sent to ILM, which they scanned. And this was part of their process in developing Peter Cushing for Rogue One.
Oh, wow.
In digital form. And there was, they actually showed them scanning the life cast on an ABC special or something like that. But it's a really neat little piece of history that has, links to Peter originally from a fun, dopey movie from the 80s, who, Peter was in the original Star Wars, and then now has this new sense of life that, it was part of the process for Rogue One, and kind of just a neat extra layer of story.
Yeah, fantastic.
And yeah, that was a picture I found online years later, and it's just like, how cool is that, Stuart?
That's awesome.
And in the background, you can see one of the greenhouses. His whole property at the time had 4 or 5 greenhouses on it, and those were his workshops, and that's where he'd kept a lot of his stuff. Which is why a lot of his stuff didn't come out in the best of shape.
Exactly.
He seemed like a bit of a ham. Was he a good time, Tom?
He definitely, that's a good way to put it. He definitely had a little showiness about him. He was a fun guy. Talking with him, some of the stories he told. He told one story about Jane Mansfield. I won't go into the details, but at the end of the story, his wife, Kay, leans in, looks over, and goes, "Oh, it's difficult being Stuart Freeborn." And it was just like, okay, because he's complaining about something. And but it was just, the two of them were very, very sweet people. There's a lot of guys out there who knew him well and who spent a lot of time with him. I'm just lucky to spend a little time with him myself. And, the more stories I hear about it, he's a fascinating guy, brilliant beyond words, and brilliant in a genius sense, in my opinion. The saying that we have around the shop is, you can do something in a complicated way, and that might be smart. But if you can do it in a simple way, that's genius. And that was Stuart. The solutions he came up with for Chewbacca, the solutions he came up with for Yoda are dead simple, and simple to the point where they are literally genius, where you are, they're game-changing stuff that built on some stuff that was out before, but really took things into the start of an amazing arc of animatronics that didn't exist prior. And it's really, all you have to do is look at Chewbacca in the first movie. And have you ever looked in that movie and thought, "Oh, guy in a suit, nope, looks fake"? Like you
right.
don't,
Yeah, right.
you don't for a minute ever doubt it. And it's because he kept it so simple, because he didn't weigh it down with a whole bunch of cables, or he didn't have, you know, Peter bogged down in too much stuff. He let the actor come through it. And that's stuff that is so inspiring as a makeup artist and as an effects artist. And that's why I think Stuart's legacy lives on so strongly.
That's so cool.
I feel like that was a book report about Stuart Freeborn. And
no,
that is why I believe Stuart Freeborn's legacy. Grail Diary, another real obsession of mine for a while, was trying to come up with a good replica of this. I met, actually originally met Adam Savage trying to work out this. Oops, I dropped a name. Hold on. But the... we were on the RPF. This was before Mythbusters or anything, and he was just a guy I knew that worked at ILM. And I was like, "Oh, have you ever been to the archives?" He's like, "Yeah." Like, "Did you ever get to look at the Grail Diary?" "Yeah, I flipped through it. It's amazing." And so we would talk about like, "Oh, well, are there blank pages at the end? Is it all the same kind of paper? Are there different types?" And so this is very long time ago, and I was at the time making a replica of it, and I did. And eventually, I got the chance to try. Someone wanted me to authenticate this particular book, and it's known as the Black Book. The cover on this one is almost black, but everything about it matches the hero book in the archives. And there's a bunch of these that are in private hands, but they are. They're what's known as the B prop. There was a second order of diaries made later in the film.
Oh, wow.
They were shorter. They were made on different paper. They didn't have all the inserts. They had some different pages because there were pages specific to the movie that were now added in. But the hero book was made like this one. Same pages, same order, all of this stuff, same inserts. But sometimes it would be like, the hero book would have September and mine would have October for one of the inserts or something like that. Like they were pulling out of a thing. And we eventually got to talk to the people that made the books and did the distressing and stuff for the movies. And it was a husband and wife. The wife remembered, oh, that's the first one. Like that was the one that we sent to set. They shot on it for a day. And Spielberg says, it looks too much like a Bible. Make the rest of them brown. And so they took it back. They made all the other ones to match it. They sent that one, they sent them all away. And I guess this one got kept by someone and eventually made it to private hands and eventually made it to my grubby hands.
Wow.
Tom,
now that you're able to go to the archives every now and then.
Yeah.
Have you looked through the original? Like, have you seen it or?
Yeah.
I mean, does it match?
They couldn't hold me back.
Yeah. Does it match pretty well? Like, is it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it is 100% the hero style diary.
Crazy.
And there is a diary that Prop Store had that came from Robert Watts. That was one of the other hero books, and they actually put it on display at one of these conventions with an iPad that showed pictures of every page. And so it would be in a case and you could flip through the pages on the iPad, which I thought was amazing.
Oh, wow.
I almost want to do that with mine someday, but I don't want to pay for a spare iPad. But it's even there you could see like, oh no, this is the same thing. This is, and if I remember right, there's actually a little pencil number 1 and a pencil number 2. My book has a number 1. Robert Watts' book, I believe, has a number 2 in it on like the second page of the book, just off in one corner. And I don't know if that means, was this the first book? Was that the second book? Was this something they did later to differentiate stuff? I don't know, but really cool props, so detailed. So some of the pages, of course, repeat and stuff. It doesn't tell a story at all. It's all,
question. Does it naturally open to these pages, or did you pick these pages to display?
I tend to pick different pages every time I put it down.
Okay.
But I usually specifically pick a page that we haven't seen in any of the archives books. I try and find something that's a little unique. And probably just even showing this, there's probably some guy who's a Grail diary replicator going like, "Ooh, that's the first time I'm seeing that."
Right.
But which I used to do. Anytime I would see a new shot somewhere of one in a private collection, it was open to a different page, or I could just barely see part of a page behind it. Oh my God.
That's so
but
cool.
yeah, it's neat. I guess it's similar to my journey with some of the cantina stuff, where it was like, trying to make something, and then eventually the opportunity comes up to bring something in, and sometimes you luck out, and if the timing is right, it's pretty fortunate.
And then these guys.
Yeah, those were made for a friend of mine's wedding, actually. He was getting married in an old theater in New York City, and he wanted us to heckle the reception.
That's awesome.
I love this. I think I was just asking you about these.
Yeah,
right?
so it was going to be me and Eric Jacobson, who's now Miss Piggy and Fozzie and all of that. We all kind of came up together in the Henson group, and I was going to do the guy on the left. He was going to do the guy on the right, and we were going to heckle the reception. But the guy who was going to run the foam on them, somehow the molds shattered when he went to dry them out.
Wow.
They must have cooled off too quickly or something. So I managed to just pull a latex casting of each, and they're pretty rough because of that. But it was a nice way to at least preserve that. What we wound up doing was a last-minute Swedish chef to give away the cake at the wedding. So.
Oh, that's cool.
These are the weird weddings of Muppet guys and people in that group at the time. So
That's
good times,
awesome.
though. Those are just some other little guys I made. The Rizzo I probably made in 1991 or 92. He's wearing a shirt from an Alf doll. There was an Alf doll you could get at like Burger King, I think. And he had a little Hawaiian shirt on him.
I remember that.
Like, I'm stealing this shirt for my Rizzo. And then the little Yip Yips are they're fun. I got to see the originals. I worked on Sesame for a season. My internship in college was Sesame Street. And the Yip Yip Martians were so cool because they were hats. They were these hats that these knit hats, chenille knit hats that I want to say it was Carolee Wilcox, but I could be wrong, had found on the streets of New York for sale. And she took a couple of them and she untangled them. And so you just had an opening with these dangly bits. And then they would put like a stick in the back with the eyes and another stick in the mouth. And you just kind of like, yip, 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 yip. And they were fun. And I was like, I want to play with those some more after getting to play with the real ones. So let me make some.
So
after seeing these again, I'm now remembering them. They haven't been on in years, right? These are older characters.
Yeah, I don't know if they've done anything more recent with them. I feel like it's the type of character they bring back every once in a while. They I was there 93 or 90. This was probably 93, 94 season.
So they were still pretty regular then. Yeah.
And they weren't regular then, but they definitely were still around.
Still making up. Yeah.
I think it was Jerry Nelson doing them, and maybe Marty Robinson did the other one. Originally, it was I think Jim and Jerry most of the time.
Classic characters, yeah.
Yeah. And
all right, so this is some interesting stuff.
Thanks. This is just, the toy side of things. I tend to separate the props and the toys a little bit.
Sure.
The things kind of migrate around the room. And, the Ray Harryhausen stuff is all old X Plus vinyl stuff that was super, super cheap to get back in the 90s and early 2000s, I guess. But I love the characters. That's stuff that inspired me like crazy as a kid. And I'm a huge Universal Monsters fan and the classic monsters. And the stuff in there, some of it's the early sideshow pieces, the little 8-inch figures that I thought were statues until you got them and realized there were hidden joints on these things that were insane. The mummy being articulated even in the knees was just mind-boggling. And the sculpts are all amazing. The paint jobs are all amazing. Really, really that was some of Sideshow's earliest stuff, and I was hooked. And then after that, Diamond Select has done some. There's been a few others available here and there, and those I tend to cherry pick. Just if someone does a better version of a character or a very different version, I'll pick something up. There was a Gillman that came out that had, Kay, the sort of the victim as well as the creature. There's been a couple of there's a pretty good Son of Frankenstein on the far left with the fur vest and the equipment. I always like that kind of stuff. But yeah, just fun toys. There's a lot of stuff, and we can kind of flip through these pretty quick.
Tom, just curious before we flip through that Ganesh style with the swords. Does she have movable arms? Or is they static?
I believe that one had a single like kung fu grip type rotation at the shoulder.
That was the one that came on like the DVD set, right?
It didn't come with it, although they may have reissued it for that. These were available individually, and funny enough, they found their way to clearance at like Tower Records at some point. And so there were a lot of these where I would pick them up for like $20 and $25 each, and they're just amazing. They're vinyl, but
the Jason and the Argonauts piece is amazing.
Yeah, the sculpts are so spot on with all of them, and that Cyclops to me is just like one of the coolest movie creatures ever. 100%. I want to do like a 10-foot version of that one day, just out of foam. We do all these big carved foam pieces at TSD, and I just think that would be so cool to have that with the big furry legs.
Well, another fun thing to mention before we proceed. So we always talk about all of the things that exist today because of Star Wars and all the things that they have developed, whether it be technology and other elements because of Star Wars. But if it wasn't for Harryhausen, we almost wouldn't have a lot of the things that we saw in Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I mean, it's certainly what gave John Berg and Phil Tippett their start, and Dennis Muren took huge inspiration from them, and so many of those guys. Are people getting bored yet? We're like an hour and 45 in. If anybody's asleep, I apologize.
Probably, but who cares? It doesn't matter.
There's a button on YouTube where you can watch in like 2 times speed. That's how I actually watch everything.
Yeah,
so.
They can watch something else if they want. It's up to them.
The vintage indie toys. I mean, how great are those?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Not much to be said about those. A friend of mine actually gave me that convoy truck very recently. It was the only thing I was missing, and I just like talk about like, oh, that's awful nice of you. Thank you.
It's awful nice. That's really cool. Jeez.
But those are just to piss off Steve. It's so funny. They are these are if I'm not mistaken, almost all of these were, oh God, was it Art Asylum that put these out? They were like,
oh wow, yeah,
mid-level kind of things, but it was the sort of thing where, there's some stuff where I want the real high-end prop replica. There's some stuff I just want to be able to like, you know what? It was cool to be able to pick that up and flip the thing and have it make the noise,
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a bunch of these out where they were not that expensive, and it was easy to pick up the variations. I love like the early version of it, of the phaser with the white handle and all of that. I love the variations on the tricorders, and it was a really really neat stuff to pick up, and it was not too crazy expensive. So that's just, there's shelves around that are just like, oh, that's just here for fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then there's stuff that's just there because, that's where everything started.
Yeah, all the vintage stuff.
Yeah. So almost all of this is mine from when I was a kid. Cool. There's a few variants that have been picked up along the way, but and a few missing from the last 17. I was missing about 5 figures when I was a kid, and it's such a different time, 1985 or whatever it was when Power of the Force comes out. You could buy whatever your particular Toys R Us or KB Toys had, and that was it. That was all you could buy. And they never had a handful of the figures, so I never got like, I think it was the Imperial Dignitary, the Imperial Gunner, the A-Wing Pilot.
The last 17 were an odd bunch because we had KB and Child World, and they would have some, and we'd always have like, like you said, a select 4 or 5 that you wouldn't have the other. But then it was always like, is that new movie coming out? Is that a new Star Wars movie coming out? It's always that like, because you're a kid and you don't know better, Yeah,
you had no idea what was coming. Yeah, and it's you'd go to a KB Toys and there'd be a dump bin full of Bib Fortuna and Gamorreans and Scout Troopers for 50 cents each. Which, where did I leave my time machine, by the way? But,
I know.
You'd go to the shelves and there'd be like a handful of the new figures, but there was just some you never got to see. And so, it would be a few years later that I wound up in college, I guess, finding someone in the back of the newspaper that had some of the missing figures I had. And I remember meeting this guy in a parking lot, in a safe space with a buddy of mine for muscle. And he like had them in bubble wrap, and he like rolls them out on the hood of the car, and my buddy jokingly kind of goes in and goes like, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, you're gonna get us killed. But it did feel a little like a drug deal. It's like, no, it's not drugs. We're just buying, a vintage Death Star gunner,
We all get hooked early on.
It was like $40, so expensive,
That was big, yeah. That was
So
big
expensive.
money back then.
But and then some of these are just it's funny. I mean, when I was a kid, my two favorite figures were the Blue Snaggletooth, which I had no idea was important. I just knew that was one of the first figures I got, and it was a Cantina guy, and I loved him. But the Blue Snaggletooth and a naked Jawa. I always had the Jawa with the cloth robes. It was only years later that I got a real vintage vinyl cape there. But the naked one was like, I would always take the robes off because I thought they looked cooler with the bandoliers. And so, when I set this all up, thanks, Miguel. When I set this all up, I was like, I gotta represent the naked in there. To me, that's like, that Jawa is a legit variation for me. And it's like such a direct link to my childhood. And the Dewback was another that just like, oh gosh, there's
awesome.
Nothing cooler than that thing.
That's so cool.
And then a bunch of other miscellaneous vintage. I like things where the box has some character. I'm definitely not a mint in box guy. I want a toy I can display and a box that isn't torn to hell, but has some wear. Like I don't need it to be a brand new box. Some of them are mine from when I was a kid. Some of them are things that I picked up later. I've been going back here and there and just filling in the collection. In particular lately, I'm looking for a couple of the old mini rigs now, stuff that again just never showed up at my particular KB Toys. So I
Tom,
never got to get it.
Is this your area after a long day in the studio where you come home and just pew pew pew?
This is really
it's a great setup.
This is well displayed, Tom. I like this.
It's funny. It's a little haphazard to me at the moment, just because I've added a few things. It's funny. There's actually next to that Darth Vader figure.
I'm sorry.
So the open shelf in the middle. If you want, you could even zoom in on him a little bit. But that shelf is where I tend to throw stuff that someone gives me. And so someone gave me like a mock-up vinyl cape Jawa years ago. Terrible fake, but it was neat. And then to the left of that is a replica that a guy on eBay was making of the rocket firing Boba Fett.
Oh, that's the Mark Poon rocket firing, yeah.
It was one of those ones where I was like, you know what? It's like, I know it's a fake. Everyone knows it's a fake. I'm not going to try and fool anyone. But man, do I want to hit that button and see that rocket fire just once. Like, I want to know what that feels like. Since I was 7 years old, I have wanted to do that. And then the Droid Factory there, I mean, talk about for a kid that was a maker, that was so amazing to do that. And the in among my vinyl, my vintage figures is, sorry, another vinyl flex there, Miguel. But in among the vintage figures is the three-legged R2 that you can do in the.
I was gonna say that was one with the three-legged R2. I used to love that he had the third leg coming out. Yeah.
Totally. But yeah, so. Anyway, and then a couple of the big things there. Yeah, love these.
That's a fantastic setup.
Palisades toys, man, they crushed it on these. It's so rare to see, or at least it was at the time. It's rare to see Muppets produced in 3 dimensions in a way that felt real and natural and right. And
you said Palisades on this, Tom?
It was Palisades Toys. They eventually went out. Diamond Select has been doing, I believe it's Diamond Select, has been doing another series of it, but they're a different scale, unfortunately. So I've just kind of capped it off with what the Palisades did, and it's such a great group. And
amazing.
Man, the Muppet Show was another show for me back in the day where the level of inspiration was massive. And just stays with me today and really nudged me in the direction for so much of what I've gotten to do in my life. So I love it. Stuff that you really do. Yeah. You just look at it and smile. It's like that case with the vintage figures, the two, IKEA cases on the wall there with just all the 77, all the old vintage figures there. It's like, it could be the craziest screen use prop in the world. Nothing is going to give me the feeling that I get when I look at that case of my old toys. That so many hours of imagination and time was spent and I'm just so glad that I held on to them. I held on to the weapons mostly, and just
that's amazing.
Man, yeah, it's pretty cool to have, and it really is like a special thing to sit down and look at. That's
really cool. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time and walking us through your collection. Talk about a very unique collection. It's very, very cool to see. And then also really cool to see what inspired you, what inspires you today, to make some of the cool stuff that you're making for all of us. It's just really neat.
I appreciate that greatly. Thank you so much. And it's nice to be able to share, that was probably as close to a virtual walkthrough that anyone's going to get there. So,
well, we appreciate you coming on and doing that for us.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people have been excited for that. So
yeah, it's been fantastic seeing little elements of, pieces that, like you said, even the Muppets, how excited you got that was such an inspiration, and going back to those times and seeing all the sentimental value, because like you said, we talked about, so many people are curious about monetary value, but it's the sentimental value that can't be topped. But
and it's why we all do this. It's why we're all obsessed with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I love Tom, what you did say too about giving, which I don't think a lot of us talk about, giving breath to the pieces that you collect that are special to you and that are the most, the most special thing in your collection, giving them space. I think that's smart. And I think that's not something that I've thought of at all. And I like that. I like that thought of just kind of, seeing what you think is the, some of the more special things in your collection, give them a little space to.
And you definitely, as you see it in person, you really do soak that up. I think it comes out. It's like, oh, there is something about a little bit of air around something that just gives it, it gives it something special. Yeah.
In Steve's collection, everything has air around it, but that's because he has a lot of space. So everything's special. Everything's special to see.
I think that's well said, because there are certain pieces that I separate, and you're right, they may not necessarily have a larger value monetarily, but they mean something more to me. So it's one of those things that I'm showcasing for a reason, that look, this is standing out and being a focal point for a purpose. But it's just funny, especially the things that you choose to work on, as an individual, being somebody who's passionate about, but also bringing it into your business. And I got to say, one of the conversations we had, I think going a little over a year back, where I knew sort of a match made in heaven, is when if I'm quoting you correctly, I think it was the CZ3 bus was coming out, and you said, well, who doesn't want a CZ3, right? Like, who doesn't want one? And I was like, this is the guy who needs to be making Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
That sounds like something I would have said. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, we've always, we really appreciate, Tom, you bringing us into, and we've talked about this, Jason, bringing us into a new age of collecting. Really, really, think about when Master Replica was doing their thing. No one really thought anything very much of it until now. Right now, you're like, wow. Wish we could have. It was groundbreaking, and I wish we could have that. And I feel like you're starting to do that work. And I'm looking forward to what
we're trying to make sure that we're keeping it unique in the process, and trying to do something. We have an identity now. We've kind of carved out. We know what's important and special to us, and we're going to try and keep giving that to folks and give them a chance to join us in the fun, as it were.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fantastic. I think Gabe had said, one of his videos, that Master Replicas had been the golden age of collecting, and I had, followed that with speaking with him, saying that, I think now with Regal Robot, we are now following, a new era of going into that direction. Yeah. And Gabe had actually just discussed that recently, saying, that is correct, but it's actually pushing the needle a little further, because the level of accuracy that we've never seen before in these things. So it really is amazing. And I really do appreciate the amount of time that you take to step outside that, participate, share your collection, share your thoughts, your inspirations, and all the influences that come into that. So
I don't think there's enough room in this frame for my head now.
No, there's not.
Is it going like this?
There's not. Yeah, exactly. We'll go like this, like that.
No one needs to see that.
I love it. I love it. No, but again, thank you, Tom, and
thank you
for everyone in the chat. We appreciate you hanging out. And it was a long one, but it was well worth it, and we really do appreciate you hanging out.
Thank you, and yeah, if anybody wants to follow along with the stuff I'm doing, look up TomSpinaDesigns.com, look up RegalRobot.com, and follow us at Tom Spina Designs, at Regal Robot everywhere.
And keep your stuff out of the sun,
man.
Keep your stuff out of UV. Yeah, for sure.
Well, all right, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. Good night to everybody. And thanks everybody who's still awake.
Exactly. Thank you, guys. Join us tomorrow for group therapy, and we'll see you soon. Appreciate it.